Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Missy, thank you very much. I understand that, unfortunately, because of illness, Representative Farr was not able to visit with you today. That's unfortunate because he is a true champion for organic production and has been a strong voice in the House of Representatives and on the Ag Committee. So I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to visit with him this morning. I certainly have a lot of admiration for him. Missy, I want to thank you very much for your service on AC 21, and George, it's good to see you. I think we're going to see each other later this week, I believe. Certainly appreciate the advice and counsel that George and the folks at Organic Valley have provided as we have journeyed together in expanding opportunity for the organic industry. I also do want to give a shout out to our organic working group at USDA. Ann Alonso and Betsy Ricola have basically been working collaboratively together at USDA to really encourage greater outreach, utilizing social media, 23 blogs and counting, a number of webinars, and as Missy indicated, over 30,000 employees here at USDA now, taking not just Organic 101, but actually progressing to Organic 202. So at some point in time, we're going to probably give them a doctorate in organics. But this is important so that people understand at USDA how significant this industry is. Your announcement today about sales increase, now almost $40 billion, a significant increase over last year, a little over 11%. I also noticed an increase in export opportunity, which is very, very important in terms of supporting the industry and also creating additional jobs. So I thought what I'd do today is give you a sense of the activity that has taken place at USDA over the last 12 months since I last reported to you, and it's been quite active. And you'll see, I think, as I discuss the scope of activity at USDA, that we indeed see organic as an integral part of American agriculture and an integral part of our responsibility at USDA. Let me start with a focus on producers. We're announcing today an increase in the number of certified producers nationwide, now at 19,475. It's a 5% increase over last year, and we're really looking forward to the development of the Organic Integrity Database, which is we're using Farm Bill resources to create this database so that we'll really have a very accurate read and understanding of the nature of producers in this country. Looking forward to the completion and publication of the survey, the producer survey that was conducted earlier this year, that information about the producers, who they are, where they are, what they're doing, we anticipate will be launched sometime this summer, perhaps in August, and that'll give us more information and data, which in turn will allow us to focus and target our resources appropriately. We're also excited about a new effort that is underway in our Farm Service Agency offices. We refer to it as a bridge to opportunity. It's really acquainting our Farm Service Agency officers. These are the folks in counties, in over 2,000 counties across the United States. These are the folks who interact with producers. They provide loan programs, disaster programs, enroll them in CRP. We want them to understand the opportunity on the organic side as well. So in Minnesota, we have a pilot where we are beginning to educate those Farm Service folks in Minnesota about the enormous opportunities that exist in organics. And so that should help make sure that we get the information that's necessary for producers out to them as quickly as possible. We're also focused on making sure that we integrate organics into our risk management process. For many, many years, there was very difficult circumstances for organic producers to get the same kind of risk management protection that commodity producers were getting across the country. We launched this year the whole farm policy that basically is going to provide folks the ability to have a number of diverse crops that they're growing and be able to secure insurance coverage for that diverse farming operation. We've made adjustments to our NAP program, which is for crops that are not produced or not covered by crop insurance. It's an opportunity to provide some degree of risk management, and we now have a separate market price for organics included in that program. We've expanded the price selection opportunity in risk management now to 26 elections, 69 different crops, and we're going to continue to see that number expand over time. And of course, we eliminated the surcharge. So an expansion of risk management, better understanding at the county level of organic and the role organic plays. Taking a look at information that we're providing to organic producers so that they can more realistically price their products, because it's much more of a personal relationship between the organic producer and the consumer. We want to make sure they have market information that's up to date. Ann and her team have been working on expanding the amount of information we provide through our market news, now over 250 organic products where we provide market information. That will continue to expand as we learn more about the market. Very involved in research, integrating that into our overall research initiatives. Very proud of the fact that we've invested, since I've been Secretary, over $220 million specifically targeted to organic. And now, as a result of the Farm Bill, we have the Organic Research Initiative, which is a separate and distinct commitment of nearly $100 million that will absolutely go into organic research. And we expect and we're hopeful that the new foundation that was established, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture, which is a opportunity for us to leverage additional research in the ag space. We have, of course, the Agricultural Research Service, which is our internal research activities at USDA, over 100 labs doing about 800 research projects right now. We also have the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which is our external relationship with land-grant universities, where we provide grants for external research. And now we have a private foundation that has been set up and established, a 15-person board, representatives on that board from the organic industry, who will be making decisions about how to utilize the $200 million that has been placed in that foundation from federal resources, matching that at least dollar for dollar and hopefully more, encouraging more private sector investment, and having this research foundation basically complement the research that's being done at USDA. And we'll fully expect that organic will be a beneficiary of that as well. You know, we're looking forward to, well, there's one clap there, so that's good. You know, this research issue is a big issue, and it actually deserves a lot of attention. We really have not done the kind of research in agriculture generally that needs to be done, and I think we're now beginning to have a better recognition and understanding of the important role that agriculture is going to play in so many different aspects of life, and even in our national security portfolio. So the ability to deal with research, the ability to note the challenges that agriculture generally are going to face as we deal with climate changes and the need for adaptation and mitigation. We established a series of climate hubs throughout the United States a year or so ago, and there are 7 of them in each region of the country. There are 3 sub-hubs. One of them is at UC Davis, taking a look at sort of the specialty crop challenges. There's one in Michigan looking at forest, and then there's one in Puerto Rico looking at the Caribbean issues. And we've asked these hubs, which are a combination of our ARS folks and our NRCS folks and our Forest Service folks, asking them to basically take a look at what the current state of play is in terms of vulnerabilities for agriculture in the region and for forestry in the region. And then basically identify the technologies and techniques that potentially could be used by producers to mitigate or adapt to these changes that are going to be forthcoming. And it's a way of having that conversation about the importance of adaptation and mitigation strategies. And we will be working with a number of sister agencies throughout the United States government to establish and to sort of amplify the President's Climate Action Plan, trying to figure out ways in which we can continue to encourage agriculture to reduce its emissions and look for ways in which we can maintain the sink capacity of our forests, and the combination allows us to go, I think, forcefully later this year to the international community in terms of the U.S.'s commitment on climate. So research is important. We want to continue to do business with the rest of the world, and Interestingly enough, I just got finished reading a book about Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill in 1941, and their effort to try to understand each other and to work with each other during the beginning of World War II. And they started that process by FDR's insistence that they put together what was referred to as the Atlantic Charter. And it was essentially a statement of philosophy about their approach not just to the war and to conflict, but to the post-war era. It was an optimistic view that eventually the Allies would prevail, and the question would be, what kind of world would we have after that occurred? What struck me, especially as it relates to the discussions today in this town and across the country, is the important role that trade played in that Atlantic Charter. It was FDR's vision that every country ought to have access to goods and services that they need to have a prosperous economy, and if everyone were willing and able to trade with one another to ensure that access, that we would have a safer and better world. Well, we're still dealing with issues of trade, and obviously the organic trade is important from a twofold perspective. One, creating opportunities for our producers to additional market opportunities, which is why we entered into equivalency agreements with Canada and Korea and Japan and the EU, and now we're focusing on the negotiations and discussions with our friends in Mexico to see if we can make it easier for that trade to take place in the organic space. But we are now focused on the opportunity in Asia with the Trans-Pacific Partnership discussions. This is an enormous opportunity, and I think it's an enormous opportunity for organics. Not often discussed in the context of this trade agreement, but when you realize who we're talking about and what we're talking about in Asia. Today it's home to 525 million middle-class consumers who are obviously looking for high value-added quality products. In just 15 years, it's anticipated and expected that that number will grow to 3.2 billion. That is 10 times the population of the U.S. It's an enormous opportunity. And the question will be whether or not the U.S. is helping to lead the effort to increase standards, to raise standards across the board in terms of labor and environment and enforcement and tariff reductions and so forth, or whether we're going to cede that opportunity to other countries and specifically to China. And in this space, it seems to me that the U.S. wants to be intricately involved in this effort to make sure that we help to write the rules and lead that effort to take advantage of that growing middle class and to make sure that these trade agreements are indeed living up to the vision that FDR had many, many, many years ago of raising standards and in doing so providing for a more peaceful and secure world. So it's something that you all need to be keeping an eye on, and hopefully you're engaged in discussing with your congressional representatives and senators the importance of trade promotion and specifically trade promotion authority. This president does not currently have the same capacity that presidents in the past have had, which is to essentially create from Congress a framework of what a trade agreement ought to include: high standards, focus on labor, focus on environment, etc. And then have the ability to conclude negotiations within that framework, and then have Congress basically agree to an up or down vote on the agreement, not subject to amendment. It's very difficult in a negotiation, if you think about this, if on the other side of the table, the people who are negotiating with you believe that what they're negotiating is not necessarily the final deal, that indeed 535 folks may weigh in with an amendment or two. And so the final and best offer from the other side of the table is never forthcoming because they're concerned that they may give away more than they should until they know for certain that whatever is agreed upon by our trade representative in the negotiations is indeed the agreement that's going to be voted on up or down. It's one of the reasons why we're currently having a little difficulty accessing our Canadian friends in negotiations, because they are understanding our system and understand that currently this president does not have the same power that every president has had since FDR in one form or another. So keep an eye on trade as it relates to the organic industry. We are also very much involved in trying to work with organic producers on conservation. We have invested over $111 million in conservation with 6,500 farms that are involved in organic production. Frankly, well, actually, I appreciate that, but you really shouldn't have clapped for that. It really needs to be more than that, which is why we're working with NRCS to get some additional technical service providers on board that can begin the process of reaching out to folks where they are on their land to be able to discuss the details of how conservation plans can be worked. We need to do a better job of doing that, and I'm relatively certain that producers are anxious to have that information. We just need more boots on the ground. We're committed to getting that done this year, and if I'm back next year, if you invite me back and I'm still got this job, which you don't laugh about that because I got a big certificate on the wall of my office that says I serve at the pleasure of one guy. So you never know. But we are committed. Betsy and I had a conversation with our NRCS folks, committed to getting more boots on the ground. So that's important. You know, another interesting aspect of USDA is our regulatory system, where we're working, and I'm sure everyone's very interested in a variety of rules relative to the organic industry. I'm just going to give you some updates on where some of these rules are in our system and process. And I know that I will probably say more than I should because Ann will probably jump out of her chair. We obviously are focused on animal welfare. There is a proposed rule that we're working through our system. We would expect and hope to get departmental clearance sometime this summer and make movement and progress on that. There is an issue involving dairy cattle being converted into organic. We're expecting to publish the proposed rule soon that focuses on trying to increase consistency and integrity in the program. We know how important that is to the industry. And on aquaculture, that is in departmental clearance, and our hope is that we get something through our process sometime in 2015. We know that the Organic Standards Board has proposed standards, and we're trying to work within their suggestions and recommendations. We're also reopening the conversation of Part 340 in terms of APHIS and its review on noxious weeds and so forth. We know that that's important to you. We had something proposed many, many years ago. Because it was proposed, we were sort of prevented from having a conversation. We think there's a broader audience interested in this than there was several years ago when it was initially proposed. So we pulled that down and reopened the conversation, and we will continue to make having conversations about this so that we can formulate a rule that makes sense. So that's sort of an update on regulations. Two interesting things have occurred in the space that I think suggest and indicate how organics have now been institutionalized at USDA. You know, and it's extremely important that this occurs. And this 30,000 folks have been educated. These are people who are going to be at USDA long after Anna leaves, I leave, long after the political folks leave. These are the people that are going to understand the importance of this industry. So you have to ask yourself, well, is it being reflected in activities that take place within USDA? Well, yeah, two examples. We recently launched the Food Insecurity Nutrition Initiative. And this was an initiative in the Farm Bill that's designed to encourage SNAP families. These are people that receive supplemental nutrition assistance, often and unfortunately referred to as food stamps. We're encouraging those families to purchase more fruits and vegetables. $100 million set aside, divided into 3 or 4 years of announcements. And we recently made an announcement in Florida launching this year's projects that we're funding. And the Florida project involves, I don't know if Marty Mesh is here. Where is he? Marty, yeah, there he is. So Marty, if I don't say this right, you can correct me. Marty was there at the press conference and certainly appreciated his involvement, but the reason he was there was because several $1 million is being provided to the Organic Association down there in Florida to encourage those SNAP families to go into grocery stores and understand the organic opportunities that they have for purchasing. Well, that's a market expansion. It's a relatively small thing, but I think it's reflective of the fact that organics is now sort of infiltrated throughout all aspects of USDA, and that's an important, I think, an important part. And Marty, I appreciate you being there. The second involves our efforts to try to get more money invested in rural communities, generally. Rural America is a really, it's an important place in America. It's a place that far too few people in this country appreciate. And it is a place where there is significant poverty. 95% of the persistently poor counties are located in rural America, not necessarily urban-centered America. We just launched, the President just launched the Rural Child Poverty Initiative. Again, high percentage of populations with really high child poverty rates, over 30%. 1 out of every 4 kids across the country in rural America is living in poverty. So it's important for us to figure out ways in which we can encourage people to invest more resources in rural America so that in turn more jobs can be created and families can be better supported. And one of the things we did was to establish and to encourage the development of what are called Rural Business Investment Companies, RBICs. And these RBICs are entities that provide and pool resources from investors, and then those resources are then invested in small businesses in purchasing equity in small businesses. 10% interest, a 20% interest, a 30% interest. These are small businesses. Many of them are startups. They're not interested in necessarily borrowing more money. They're looking at getting partners. So the first RBIC that we established in this effort was through Advantage Capital, which is located in Missouri, and they are beginning to make investments with their $150 million fund. Their second investment was to American Botanicals, which is a company that is involved in organic production of roots and herbs. And they now have an equity interest in that company that's going to allow that company to expand and encourage more activity. So that's, again, an indication of how deep organics is penetrated within the USDA network. We have an expansive network, but if you look at all that I've just outlined, whether it's our county offices, whether it's market news, whether it's risk management, whether it's conservation, our nutrition programs, our rural development programs, all of that now incorporates a sensitivity and an understanding of the role that organics could potentially play in furthering the mission of each mission area within USDA. 2 other items, and then I'll be glad to take questions. One involves our efforts at coexistence. We continue to have that conversation, and we've extended the comment period at the request of many organic producers because a lot of folks are in the field doing their work. So that comment period has been extended until May 11th of this year, so would encourage anybody to weigh in on that subject. And then we are obviously finalizing the rule that will expand the organic exemptions to the traditional standard assessments and checkoffs, and we're awaiting the decision that you all and the people in the organic industry will make relative to your own checkoff. As soon as you all figure out what you want and you make application, we'll obviously process that appropriately. So I think you can see with this report, it's a little different than it was 4 years ago. It's a little more detailed, a little more specific, and I think it does indeed reflect a commitment because we understand the high value nature of this. We understand the importance of it from a producer standpoint, from a value standpoint, and from a economic development perspective. So with that, I'll be glad to try to answer questions if I haven't hopefully answered most of them already. Thank you. Okay. Questions? Yes. Am I in charge of figuring out who gets the question? Or oh, no, the microphone person is. Okay. Well, it should be.
Hi. Thank you so much. My name is Jake Lewin. I'm the president of CCF Certification Services. We're a USDA accredited certifier under the National Organic Program. And I want to thank you for your support and the work you're doing and the various rules and whatnot that you're moving forward. We really do appreciate that. But, so we and our certified operations have a significant concern regarding FSIS policy regarding non-GMO claims on organic meat products. Currently, they appear to be requiring about 27 words to describe this, where 4 or 5 could easily do. And essentially relying on a draft guidance from 2002, when us as a USDA certifier, we can't rely on draft guidance coming out of the department itself. So really what we're looking for is, we all know organic standards prohibit GMOs, and we're wondering if we can get your support to find a labeling process through FSIS that simply lets us make that statement.
Well, the one thing I know about this, having been briefed on this recently, not this particular issue, but just the labeling issue generally, that it's complicated. And so what I will pledge to you is to go back and visit with the FSIS folks about this and figure out precisely what their rationale and thought process is, and see if we can figure out a way that is satisfactory to them and to the industry. Obviously, labeling is a complicated and, in some cases, a controversial area. You know, I spent an hour the other day in my office trying to figure this out, and I'm frank to say I'm not quite comfortable with my own knowledge about it because it is complicated, the difference between GMO and GE, you know, and how our relationship with FDA on all of this, and what is our responsibility relative to truth and accuracy of whatever the label is, and then the issue of precisely what does it mean to be non or not contain. Is it 100%? Is it 99.1%? Is it 99.5%? What percent is it? And there really, I don't think there is some consensus, but I don't know that it's a general consensus about what that standard should be. And as our testing materials and testing equipment becomes even more accurate, we're going to have a very legitimate conversation about precisely what does it mean. If there is an expectation that we're going to have 100% purity, that's going to be tough. Even in the conversation of the coexistence, when we talked about, I'm going to meet with the seed people later today, you know, they want to have a very tight standard. We're looking now, because of issues that the organic industry raised, we're looking at our own seed banks and our own germplasm to figure out what the status of that is. And depending upon where you set that bar, you could potentially create a real significant shortage of necessary seeds if something were to occur and we were in a situation where we have to replant stuff. So, long way of saying, I'll look at it. I don't want to commit to it because I don't know enough to know whether what the right answer is, but I will commit to looking into it. Got it down on the list here, and I'll take it back to my office, and Betsy's here, and she'll make sure that I follow up on it. Okay?
Thank you.
Secretary.
Where are we? Oh, there, Marty. Okay.
So last millennium, we advocated for an innovative public-private partnership. We would grow, handle, distribute, and offer for sale certified organic products to the public, and the public part would develop uniform standards and enforce the standard, accredit certifiers, facilitate trade, among other things. From the industry side, the perceived failure of the public side to hold up its end of the partnership to get final rules published in any reasonable manner raises concerns. I scratched out part of my question because you just articulated, you know, summer, the livestock aquaculture, which, you know, I've been working on the aquaculture one for over 10 years. I mean, 10 years without a final rule is just not okay. And so as we go to the Hill and continue to request increased appropriations for USDA, how do we remain confident that USDA will uphold its end of the public-private partnership in improving its ability to react to the evolving marketplace desire for more certified organic products while giving U.S. farmers and entrepreneurs in rural America an opportunity to access this organic market opportunity?
Well, first of all, wish you all the best of luck in encouraging Congress to give us more money. Look, folks, I'm currently dealing with a budget that is the budget that does all the work that you want us to do. That is less than the budget was when I became secretary in the first full budget the president submitted. And we're it's 6 years down the road. We're dealing with less money. We've had to reduce our workforce. I think our full-time workforce when I first started, I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of 104,000 people. And the most recent report that I looked at in terms of the diversity of our workforce has us at 85,000. So we have more work to do and fewer people and less money. And here's why. Marty, I'm going to try to answer your question, but you've touched a nerve here, so you're going to get it back. The problem is that people around this country have, for the last 30 years, felt that the government is a four-letter word, and that the government doesn't work, and that the government screws up, and that the government doesn't understand, and that the government shouldn't have more money, and in fact is currently taking far more than it ought to. Just a FYI, as a percentage of our gross domestic product, government spending at the federal level is the lowest it's been since Dwight Eisenhower was president. It's before a lot of you were born. We have got to make sure that people understand that there are aspects of government that are working pretty doggone well, and that we ought not to be defensive about that. So I'll just give you one example, the SNAP program. Under attack here, under attack. Folks want to block grant the SNAP program. Want to block grant it. Feel the states, the laboratories of democracy, will do a better job administering this program, overseeing this program than the federal government. And we're told that when they do that, we'll magically save $125 billion. Well, folks, the only way you can save money in SNAP, you either have to reduce the number of people getting it, or you have to reduce the amount of money folks are getting. That's the only two ways you can reduce the cost of SNAP. The reality is that if you do $125 billion, you're cutting 11 to 12 million people out of the program, or you're limiting resources so that a family of four will have 9 months of benefits, the equivalent of 9 months of benefits instead of 12. Single best and most effective anti-poverty program we have. Every dollar that's generated in the SNAP programs generates $1.70 of economic activity. Lowest fraud and error rate in the history of the program. Declining numbers because of an improving economy, 61 consecutive months of private sector job growth. And a new pilot program designed to try to figure out, for the 20% or so that may potentially be able to work, because 80% of SNAP beneficiaries are senior citizens, people with disabilities, children, or people already in the workforce. So how are you going to cut? Who are you going to cut there? You're going to cut the seniors? Going to cut the people with disabilities? You're going to cut the kids? You're not going to do that. Shouldn't do that. So I get that you're frustrated with the amount of time it takes. I get that. And I get that we have prioritized certain aspects of this industry over other aspects, which is why aquaculture has taken a long time, because we were doing other stuff that we felt was important to maintain the integrity and consistency of the organic label, of the organic brand, and all this other stuff that I just got finished talking about. You see, when you do a regulation, it involves oftentimes the same damn people, because we have few people in the General Counsel's office, few people in the Office of Budget and Management, our budget and policy people. They got the same people reviewing all these regulations. When they pass a new farm bill, there were 450 different actions that had to take place. So you have a choice between getting resources out to disaster assistance to livestock producers that were struggling and that were getting out of the business because they had no disaster program for 3 years, because Congress didn't pass a farm bill, didn't extend the disaster program, didn't extend it through the last farm bill for the entire length of the farm bill. And you ask yourself, which do you do first? Well, You know, you got to make choices. We understand the importance of this, and we're going to get to it, and we're going to do it systematically. But please understand that until Americans understand that not all government is screwed up, not all government makes mistakes, not all government is doing stuff and wasting money, that there is a lot of activity in this department that is being done well by really hardworking people, dedicated people, people who were working overtime, people who worked in the face of a shutdown, in the face of threatened furloughs and layoffs and reduced workforce and the more work that they've got to assume. And these are federal workers who until recently hadn't had a pay increase in 3 years. So, and they go into a coffee shop, they sit down, they sit next to a group of folks, and what do they hear people talk about? They're complaining and bitching about government. You know, I mean, seriously, at some point in time, enough. There is a function and reason for government. There is an important role that government plays, particularly in this industry. I mean, you know, who is going to be the protector of the brand? I mean, look at what's happening in terms of the concept of natural. I'll bet you if I ask you all to write the definition of natural, I would have, how many people are here? Let's see, how many people we got? 200? We'd have 200 different definitions. And that's happening in the marketplace because everyone's trying to get that edge. So you need an arbitrator. You need somebody that's going to, you know, hopefully create a standard, allow that standard to be the high value added proposition that you folks have created, and maintain that value. So I get it. We're working hard. We're doing everything we can. It's not as if we don't care. It's not as if we don't understand the importance of this. We're getting at it. It's just going to take a little longer.
Sir, you probably have time for one more question.
Does he work for you guys? Okay. We had two at that table. We had a young lady and
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack, for coming and speaking to us again. It's always a pleasure. One of the things that I wanted to thank you for all of your support personally for the organic sector, as well as USDA and the administration's commitment to the organic sector. I have two very quick questions. Hopefully the answers are just as quick. First is we're seeing more and more recognition or kind of reaching out from USDA to the organic sector. And my question is that we're discussing the checkoff program on a pretty regular basis. It seems to me that probably the low-hanging fruit at this point would be to go to the existing marketing orders that are there right now for various crops and just simply add the word organic to those. Such as the almond industry. We're asking some things from the California Almond Board to do some things with almonds, and they say we can't do that because the word organic is not in the marketing order. And so we've gone back and said, okay, well then petition for it. And they said, well, we can't petition for it. So any advice from you how we might go about just going into these, I believe it's 8 or 10 marketing orders, how can we go in and simply just add the word organic and kind of further that acceptance by USDA of the organic sector? My second is California. Everybody is well aware of the drought situation, and our water bank in California and a lot of western states has a tendency to be the mountains. And the mountains, of course, are part of the National Forest System. And one of the things that we're seeing is we're not getting a runoff that we once got. And there's a lot of efforts to do restoration work so we can get that water down into the lower areas, into the farms and things like that. Is there something that can be done to fast track some of these restoration projects to avoid catastrophic fire that's going to damage the entire ecosystem, not to mention that water that runs down into the farms and into the communities in California? Thank you again for all of your help, and we really appreciate you coming out here. Thank you.
those are not questions that can be answered quickly. The first question about the marketing orders, it just reminds me of how broad the scope is of this department. And the candid answer from my perspective is I don't know enough to be able to answer that question with any degree of intelligence. but you bring it up, and so our team will take a look at it, and then they'll let me know what are the pros and cons, how difficult is it, what does it mean, how complicated will it be, how much time will it take, who will be opposed to it, who's for it, and we'll obviously have to weigh all of that to decide what's the best avenue. We understand where you want to get to. The question is, how do we get there in the quickest, most efficient way? And I will commit that that's what we're interested in. We're not interested in playing games with this, but we need to make sure that what we do is efficient and effective and doesn't create more trouble than it's worth. But your second question is a much more profound one, and I do want you to know that we are aggressive in our efforts on drought in California. We are investing additional resources in conservation. In the short term, we're investing resources in emergency conservation assistance for communities. We are working feverishly to expand knowledge in the countryside about best utilization and most effective and efficient use of water resources. And we're doing some cutting-edge research. The most recent research project that was completed was capturing fog and using that as a tool for dealing with scarce water resources, which obviously makes a good deal of sense. And we're obviously taking a look at desalination and the challenges with that. On the Forest Service, specifically, this administration understood the linkage between forests and water conservation and preservation. And I'm proud to say the forest planning rule that we crafted in this administration through the most collaborative process in the history of forest planning rules resulted in a forest planning rule that actually discussed water and actually suggested that we had a responsibility to manage our forests in a way that would allow them to do the very best job they are capable of doing of conserving and preserving the water resources, because they are a natural reservoir. And the planning rule that we established was recently upheld in court proceedings, which is good news, and we've got 20 forests that are already in the process of literally managing it persistent and consistent with this new directive. The notion of restoration and resilience has two components to it. You've asked the desire to fast track this process, and we obviously have, in order to do a project, we have got to follow the NEPA requirements, the environmental assessment that's done, and we have come up with a way to reduce the amount of time that takes in a number of ways. One way is by taking a look at a large landscape and doing a large-scale NEPA on that large landscape. And then when there's specific projects within that landscape, all you have to do is kind of tweak it a little bit and make it very specific to that particular location. So that cuts the amount of time. We also are working with the private sector and suggesting that the private sector has a role to play here. Utility companies, for example, that have transmission lines that are running through these forests. Is there a way they can help us with restoration efforts? Because it's in their long-term best interest to do this. But it gets back to my good friend Marty over here and the budget. Marty wants more money. Great. Here's the problem. In order for us to do that restoration work, in many cases we have to pay somebody to do it. We like to pay people to do it. We have some resources to do it, but here's the problem. Over the last 15 years, the amount of our Forest Service budget that goes to fire suppression has gone from 15% to nearly 50%. Now, the pie hasn't gotten a lot bigger. So 50% of a pretty standard or stuck pie in terms of size, now going to fire suppression, which used to go, 35% of it, used to go to restoration, used to go to recreation, used to go to all the things that people like to do in the forest. We're asking Congress, without spending any more money of the federal budget, to spend it differently when it comes to fire suppression. We're suggesting that these fires are natural disasters, just in the same way a flood is, and a hurricane is, and a tornado. When a tornado hits a community, when a flood hits an area, when we have a disaster, FEMA comes in with their disaster assistance and provides help and assistance from a special design fund for that purpose. We're asking Congress to give us the permission to use that fund for just 2% of the fires that we fight. The 2% that are the most expensive. The 2% that we can't contain, that end up being multi-million, tens of millions, in some cases, $100 million fires. If we were able to do that, we would then be able to have certainty with the restoration and resilience budget. Because every year Congress appropriates not enough money in the fire suppression budget, doesn't give us the flexibility to use the emergency fund from FEMA, and then says, well, here's all this money for restoration. But the fire's burning, and you've run out of money. So you're going to say to the homeowner, Ted here, Ted, sorry, I know your house is burning, but we've run out of money. We're going to not take money from the restoration and recreation trail money to put the fire out. Well, no, Ted's not going to accept that. So we take money from those accounts and we put the fire out. Then Congress next year replenishes those monies, but no, we never have the certainty because we don't know what the fire season's going to be. And the longer we delay the restoration and resilience, the more severe the fires become because the hazardous fuel buildup is intense. And we were fortunate last year, but we could have a horrific year this year. So in order to do what you want us to do beyond what we've already done, there either has to be, some kind of magic. Marty's going to go up there and convince everybody to give us more money. Or they have to give us some flexibility to use the money that's for restoration for what it was intended by giving us a different way to fight fires. If they do that, we will do more of what you want us to do. Absent that, we're going to do the best we can, but it's not as good as it ought to be. And I'm the first to admit that, and the last thing I would say is, I was at Yale yesterday, and I went to the architecture school and I went to the forestry school. There's an amazing opportunity to use wood to build multi-story buildings that would allow us to create market opportunities for a lot of this wood, a lot of this diseased wood that's in the western part of the U.S. Cross-laminated timber being used in Europe to build 10, 20, 30-story buildings. USDA put money on the table, the Softwood Lumber Company put money on the table, and we created a fund of $3 million, and we challenged the architects and designers and builders of this country, with this money, give us a couple of projects where we would actually see multi-story buildings built of wood. I'm telling you, what these kids did at the architecture school, they're taking a small part of New Haven, and they're pretending that they could rebuild that dilapidated area with kind of wood structures, and it's just incredible what they've come up with. That's also part of it. Figuring out how to create market opportunities beyond the traditional standard market opportunities. Because at the end of the day, it's actually cheaper, it's actually more fire resistant, which is amazing, than cement and steel, because these cross-laminated timbers do not burn, they char, so they don't collapse like steel and concrete. And from a greenhouse gas standpoint, they're terrific because they continue to sequester the carbon. And whereas steel and cement basically require more emissions. So it's a terrific opportunity for us, and that's something that we're trying to do at USDA. We're trying to be innovative when it comes to this issue. Thank you all very much.